Clara had always trusted Mitchell. For years she believed they shared something unshakable, but lately her instincts told her something was wrong. He came home late, avoided her eyes, and often claimed exhaustion when she reached out. The warmth that once filled their home was fading, replaced by silence and distance. Clara could not quiet the ache in her chest, so she made a choice she never thought she would. She placed a small hidden camera in the corner of their bedroom. It wasn't about spying. It was about finding the truth she feared, but could no longer ignore. One evening, while traveling for work, Clara sat alone in a quiet hotel room. Restless, she opened her laptop and connected to the live feed. At first, nothing unusual appeared. The room was empty, perfectly still. But as minutes passed, the door opened, and Mitchell walked in. Clara leaned closer to the screen, praying she was only imagining the unease. Then, her breath caught as another figure followed him inside. A woman younger, smiling in a way that twisted Clara's stomach. Mitchell didn't hesitate. He led the woman straight to the bed, the very place where Clara had once felt safe, loved, and chosen. The screen showed them together, whispering and laughing, his hands touching this stranger with the same tenderness he once reserved for his wife. Clara's eyes filled with tears as the truth unfolded in front of her, cruel and undeniable. Her hand shook against the keyboard. She wanted to close the laptop, to escape the sight burning itself into her memory, but she couldn't look away. Every second cut deeper, the betrayal louder than any word. She realized it wasn't just infidelity, it was humiliation. Mitchell hadn't taken her trust and broken it in secret. He had dragged another woman into the very heart of their marriage, into the bed that carried their dreams, their promises, their life. Clara pressed her hand over her mouth to muffle the sound of her sobs. The room around her blurred, the world suddenly smaller, colder. It felt as if the walls of her hotel closed in, leaving only her pain and the cruel glow of the laptop screen. She thought of the years she had given him, the nights she stayed up caring for him, the sacrifices she made to build a future together. And now that future was being destroyed before her eyes, recorded by the camera she had placed out of desperation. Through her tears, Clara whispered to herself, "That wasn't just my bed. That was the place we built our life together. And he violated it in the cruelest way possible." The words tasted bitter on her tongue, but they were true. At that moment, something inside her shifted. She knew she could never unsee what she had seen. The foundation of her marriage wasn't cracked. It was shattered beyond repair. Clara sat alone after watching the footage, her thoughts drifting back to moments she had ignored. The truth had been creeping into her life for months, maybe even longer, but she had chosen not to see it. She remembered the evenings when Mitchell would call, saying he had to work late, his voice tired but distant. She had believed him, told herself he was under pressure at his job, and didn't want to worry her with detail. At the time, she even felt guilty for doubting him. Then there were the absences he never explained. He would leave for errands that should have taken an hour, but stretched into 3. When she asked, he would smile faintly and say traffic was bad, or he ran into someone he knew. Clara accepted his words, never pressing further because she wanted to believe. Trust was the foundation of their life, and she clung to it, even when the cracks began to show. She thought about the sudden changes in his mood. There were mornings when Mitchell seemed full of energy, cheerful in a way that felt almost forced. Other times, he grew impatient over small things, brushing her off or raising his voice over nothing at all. Clara told herself everyone had bad days. She explained his irritability away as stress, exhaustion, or the weight of responsibility. It never crossed her mind that his temper might have been the strain of living a double life. Even his affection had shifted in ways she didn't want to admit. His kisses grew shorter, his arms around her felt lighter, as if he were already pulling away. Nights that used to be filled with closeness often ended with him turning his back, claiming fatigue. Clara told herself love changes with time, that passion fades and is replaced with comfort. She didn't see it then, but the distance wasn't natural, it was deliberate. Clara thought about the times she had caught faint traces of perfume that wasn't hers clinging to his shirt. She had noticed the receipts stuffed into his pockets for restaurants she had never visited. Once, she even found a small hair tie under the passenger seat of his car, something delicate and out of place. Mitchell laughed it off, saying it must have been left behind when he gave a coworker a ride. Clara nodded, embarrassed for even questioning him, and tucked her doubts away. Now, as she pieced it all together, the memories stung like sharp edges cutting her open. She had been living with the signs, drowning in evidence, yet choosing hope over suspicion. Every excuse she accepted, every moment she dismissed, had been another step toward this heartbreak. She had been fighting to hold together a marriage that Mitchell had already abandoned in his heart. Sitting in the silence of her hotel room, Clara realized the betrayal did not begin with the hidden camera. It began in all those small lies, those subtle shifts, the hollow explanations that she had wanted so badly to believe. She finally understood that the bed she saw him share wasn't the start of the end. It was only the proof of a truth that had been there all along. Clara could not get the image out of her mind, but what haunted her most was the woman herself. At first, she was just a shadow on the screen, someone faceless who had stolen what was hers. But as Clara studied the footage, details began to form. The woman's voice was light and familiar. Clara had heard it before, not in her home, but when she visited Mitchell's office for holiday gathering. Her name was Tessa, a younger woman who worked with him, someone Clara had once spoken to with kindness, never suspecting she would one day stand in her place. The recognition made Clara's stomach twist. Tessa wasn't a stranger from some far-off place. She was close, within reach, living in the same world Clara did. She had smiled at her once, spoken politely, even complimented her dress. Clara had no reason to dislike her then. But now, every memory of that encounter turned bitter. The betrayal wasn't just about Mitchell. It was about being replaced by someone who had stood right in front of her, pretending innocence. Watching the way Mitchell touched Tessa was unbearable. His hand brushed her cheek, gentle and familiar, the same gesture he had once reserved for Clara. He leaned close, whispering in her ear, and though the camera didn't capture every word, Clara caught fragments. They weren't new. They were lines she knew by heart, words he had spoken to her during their first years together when they were still wrapped in love and possibility. To hear them again, given so carelessly to another, made Clara's chest ache. She noticed how he smiled at Tessa, the same crooked grin that had once melted her heart. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, layered with all the affection Clara thought belonged only to her. It felt as though he had taken their marriage, their history, and handed it away like it meant nothing. Every vow spoken at the altar, every promise whispered late at night, was being recycled for someone else. The small details cut deepest. Tessa wore a necklace Clara had seen in a boutique window months before. She had paused to admire it while shopping with Mitchell, but he had dismissed it as too expensive. Now Clara realized he hadn't been unwilling. He had simply been saving the gesture for someone else. The thought made her chest tighten until she could hardly breathe. Around the house, Clara began to see other signs she had once overlooked. A faint lipstick mark on a wine glass tucked into the back of the dishwasher. The smell of a perfume she didn't own clinging to the throw blanket on the couch. An unfamiliar coffee cup from a cafe across town, left on the counter as if dropped in a hurry. None of it was coincidence. Each clue painted the same picture. Tessa hadn't just visited their home once. She had been there often, walking freely through the space Clara had created. The pain was sharp, but beneath it, something else stirred. It wasn't only sadness. It was anger, rising slowly like fire catching dry wood. Clara realized Mitchell hadn't slipped into an affair out of weakness. He had chosen it, again and again, feeding it with lies and gestures, turning their marriage into nothing more than a cover for his betrayal. And Tessa, smiling and eager, had taken what was never hers to claim. Clara sat in silence long after the footage ended, her hands resting on the laptop as though it might burn her. The tears had dried, but the ache in her chest stayed heavy. She thought of calling Mitchell right away, of screaming down the phone and demanding answers. The urge rose sharp and hot, but something inside her stopped her. What good would shouting do? Words thrown in anger would only give him excuses, room to twist the truth. She needed something more, something that would make him feel the same crushing weight she carried when she pressed play on that camera. Her mind moved in circles. Should she confront him tonight, while the evidence was fresh and her anger was raw? Or should she hold back, keep her calm, and wait for the right moment? The thought of facing him at the door, looking into the same eyes that had lied so easily, made her stomach turn. She wanted to scream, but at the same time she wanted silence, the kind that unsettled and left no escape. Numbness settled in. She curled up in the hotel chair, pulling her knees close, shaking though the room was warm. Images of them together replayed without mercy. She had seen it with her own eyes, undeniable and permanent, and now she couldn't erase it. The more she thought about it, the more she understood that a single confrontation wasn't enough. She didn't want him to brush it off as a mistake, to beg with empty promises. She wanted him to feel exposed, powerless, just as she had felt watching from miles away. Clara tried to imagine what she would say. If she burst out with rage, he would raise his hands in defense, deny it, call it a misunderstanding. If she cried, he would pat her hand, pretend to be sorry, and she knew she might weaken in the moment. That thought scared her most, that she could still break under his words and let him win back a place he no longer deserved. She pressed her palms together and breathed deeply. No, this wasn't about rage or weakness. It had to be about control. For once, she would not be the one caught off guard. He had made his choices freely, and she would let the consequences land on him in a way that could not be undone. The more she sat with the thought, the more a quiet resolve built within her. Her pain was sharp, but she would not waste it on shouting matches or slammed doors. She would carry it carefully, use it as fuel, and make him sit in his own betrayal until he couldn't escape. Mitchell needed to see himself the way she had seen him, exposed, faithless, stripped of the mask he wore so easily. That night, Clara didn't draft any words or plan dramatic speeches. Instead, she sat in the stillness, letting the weight of what she knew settle deep inside her. It would not be quick, and it would not be loud. But when the time came, he would feel everything she had felt, and he would never forget it. She moved like someone in a quiet war, every step careful and small. First, she made sure the proof could never disappear. Instead of one file, she created several labeled folders and kept them in different places: a locked drawer at the hotel, a USB hidden inside a book at her sister's house, and a copy in an online storage account only she could access. Each copy had a short note with date, time, and the camera angle so nothing could be disputed later. Next came the papers. She spent an afternoon gathering statements, pay slips, mortgage papers, and account summaries. Where before she had trusted him to handle bills, she now took photos of key pages, wrote down account numbers, and noted recurring transfers. She made a list of every joint account and credit line, along with the passwords he used. Then she stored that list in the same secure places as the footage. She thought about safety and advantage. If anything went wrong, she wanted to be ready. She opened a single, small bank account in her name only and moved a portion of savings there. The amount wasn't large, but it was enough to give her breathing room. She also withdrew a few important documents, the deed, insurance policies, and placed them in a safety deposit box she could access alone. At home, she changed little things that would make a difference later. She started saving separate receipts, keeping small purchases on a different card, and avoiding any new joint obligations. She ordered a new mailbox key through the post office and registered a backup email that Mitchell did not know about. Each quiet action built a barrier around her future. She contacted a lawyer for a single, private conversation. She did not tell the lawyer everything at once. She asked only how to protect assets and what evidence would help in court. The lawyer's calm voice gave her facts and options instead of fiery promises. Having a professional to name steps to take grounded her. She learned which documents were essential and how to preserve digital proof properly. All this planning required acting normal in front of him. She made meals, answered his questions, and smiled when he told a joke. Mitchell seemed none the wiser. Keeping up the routine gave her cover and time. She learned to listen without reacting, to nod without agreeing. In private, she kept a small notebook of dates and small incidents, a simple log that could later show a pattern if needed. She also thought about small, telling items around the house. A wine glass in the back of the dishwasher became evidence when photographed and dated. A receipt left on the counter was saved in an envelope. She labeled these with a short note of where she found them. Simple, quiet records that added up. Most of all, she kept her feelings in check. Anger flared sometimes, but she cooled it down with small rituals. A long walk, a cup of tea, a call to a close friend who lived far away. Those brief outlets kept her steady while she prepared the larger move. Her plan was not for instant destruction. It was slow and deliberate. She imagined a future where choices had clear consequences, where truth could not be shrugged off with a few comforting words. When the right moment came, she would not shout or beg. She would show everything she had collected and let the facts speak. Until then, she continued her quiet work, building an unshakable base from which she could step forward on her own terms. Clara slipped into a role that felt strange at first, but soon became second nature. She laughed at Mitchell's stories, even when her stomach tightened. She set plates at the table, asked about his day, and folded his shirts as though nothing had changed. He kissed her cheek before leaving for work, and she returned the gesture with steady eyes, never letting him sense the storm inside. Each act of kindness was a mask, and behind it she carried the weight of knowing exactly who he was when she wasn't around. Nights were the hardest. Lying beside him, listening to his breathing, Clara felt trapped between fury and control. He would place a hand lightly on her arm or draw her close for a moment, and she stayed still, her mind elsewhere. Once those touches had been comfort, now they were reminders of betrayal. She stared at the ceiling, keeping her face calm, all the while burning with thoughts of the woman who had stood where she now lay. During the day, she sharpened her quiet strategy. She began keeping a private folder filled with notes of each suspicious moment. A sudden late meeting, a missing evening explained with a flat excuse, a scent that didn't belong to her drifting on his shirt. She didn't confront him, she simply recorded. The log grew thicker with each passing week, not loud evidence like the video, but steady proof of a pattern. She also paid attention to his words. Mitchell repeated the same phrases often, the same tired stories of long hours and stressful projects. Clara listened closely, nodding, but she noticed every detail that didn't match the last verse. Dates shifted. Names of colleagues changed. She made quiet marks in her notebook, keeping track of each small lie. It became almost mechanical. He spoke, she wrote, and he never noticed. Meals together felt like theater. He would talk about the future, about a trip they might take or a new car they should consider. Clara stirred her soup and smiled softly, while inside she thought only of the evidence waiting in her safe places. His dreams of tomorrow felt hollow, spoken as though she were nothing more than part of his scenery. She gave him what he expected, calm agreement, no resistance. Even in moments when he seemed affectionate, Clara remained distant inside. He surprised her one evening with flowers, bright lilies he placed in a vase on the table. He spoke of missing her, of wanting them to spend more time together. She thanked him gently, her voice smooth, but she saw the gesture for what it was, guilt wrapped in petals. Later, when he wasn't watching, she pressed one flower flat between the pages of her journal, not for romance, but as a mark of how he tried to cover his tracks. Every night ended the same way. Mitchell leaned over, kissed her goodnight, and turned to sleep. Clara lay still, eyes open in the dark. Each kiss was fuel, not comfort, a reminder of the lies whispered elsewhere. The longer she played her part, the stronger her resolve grew. He believed her silence meant ignorance, but in truth it meant preparation. She was waiting, holding steady until the day his world cracked open the way hers once had. Clara thought she had hardened herself enough to endure the act a little longer, but one evening proved her limits. She turned down the sheets, preparing for bed, when a sharp, sweet scent rose up. It wasn't hers. The perfume was faint but distinct, clinging stubbornly to the fabric. Her chest tightened as the truth struck hard. Tessa had been here again, not in secret corners or hidden hours, but in the very bed Clara still shared with Mitchell. Her hand gripped the sheet, as though she could tear the smell out of it. This was more than betrayal. It was arrogance. Mitchell wasn't hiding carefully anymore. He was comfortable enough to let the traces linger, believing she would never notice. That boldness, that carelessness, pierced her deeper than the images she had once seen on the camera. It meant he no longer respected her even enough to cover his tracks. She stood frozen for a long moment, staring at the mattress where she had slept so many nights, where they had once whispered plans and shared secrets. Now it felt contaminated, poisoned by someone else's presence. She sat down slowly, pressing her face into her hand. Anger and disgust spread through her until her entire body shook. There was no space left for patience. The quiet act she had kept up for weeks had reached its end. Mitchell came in a few minutes later, humming to himself, tossing his jacket onto the chair. He didn't notice her stiff posture or the way her eyes stayed fixed on the bed. He moved around the room as if nothing were wrong, settling under the very covers she had just pulled back. Clara's silence stretched heavy and cold, but he mistook it for tiredness. He said goodnight in his usual tone and drifted toward sleep, unaware of the decision forming beside him. Clara lay down carefully, not to rest but to think. The perfume clung to her senses, refusing to fade. It mingled with her memories of laughter she once trusted, and together they hardened into resolve. She could not allow another night like this, another morning where she pretended life was intact. Enough was enough. Her mind moved through the pieces she had gathered. The video stored in safe places, the notes written in careful detail, the papers copied and hidden. It was all ready. She had everything she needed to strip away his mask and leave him standing in his own shame. Tonight had pushed her past hesitation. It wasn't just about exposing him anymore. It was about reclaiming her dignity. She didn't plan for rage or violence. That wasn't who she was, and it wasn't what she wanted. What she wanted was finality, something he could never dismiss or spin with half-truths. Her revenge would be sharp but clean, not messy with shouting or broken glass. He had chosen to flaunt his betrayal. She would choose to end it with clarity so sharp it would slice through every excuse. Lying beside him in the dark, Clara felt strangely calm. The storm that had been raging inside her for weeks began to settle into focus. Her heart still ached, but beneath the pain there was steel. Tomorrow, the act would be over. Mitchell had thought her silence was weakness. He was about to learn it was the trap she had set all along. Clara chose the evening carefully. She cooked his favorite meal, set the table with care, and even poured his preferred wine. Mitchell walked in surprised, smiling as though he had stumbled into a scene of warmth and comfort. She greeted him softly, her expression calm, her voice steady. He relaxed easily, unaware of what waited. Through the meal, she asked gentle questions, nodded at his answers, and filled the silence with light chatter. Every moment was deliberate, every smile rehearsed. When dessert came, Clara placed a small plate in front of him, then set her laptop on the table as though it were nothing more than part of the meal. Mitchell glanced at it, curious, but didn't think much until she opened it and pressed play. The sound filled the room, familiar voices that did not belong in that setting. Mitchell froze, his fork halfway to his mouth, as the images unfolded. On the screen, he appeared with Tessa, their laughter clear, their movements intimate. The very walls around them seemed to tighten as the betrayal played out in plain sight. Mitchell's face drained of color, his eyes darting from the laptop to Clara and back again. He tried to speak, but the words stumbled, collapsing before they could form. "Clara, this isn't what it looks like," he stammered, but the recording continued, drowning out his excuses. Tessa's voice carried through the speakers, her laugh sharp, her tone soft with words Clara had once heard herself. Every second made the denial emptier. Mitchell reached out as if to close the screen, but Clara's hand moved first, steady and firm, keeping it open. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The truth was already louder than any argument. His mouth opened again, searching for explanations, but the footage left no room. Each attempt to cover himself fell apart under the weight of his own actions. When the recording ended, silence wrapped around the table. Clara didn't rush to fill it. She let it sit, heavy and undeniable. Mitchell's eyes shifted everywhere but her face. His hands trembled as he reached for his glass, but he didn't drink. The image of control he usually carried was gone. Only then did Clara move again. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder. Without a word, she placed it in front of him and slid it across the table. Mitchell opened it slowly, his eyes widening as he saw the neatly prepared divorce papers. His lips parted, but nothing came out. Clara looked at him with calm resolve. "There's nothing left to say," she told him softly. No anger, no pleading, only certainty. Mitchell sat frozen, the paper under his hands, the laptop screen dark now but still echoing in the air. He realized in that moment there was no escape, no chance to twist or repair what had been shattered. Clara had chosen her time, her place, and her method. He had walked into dinner expecting affection. He left with the ruin of everything he thought he controlled.